Lupita Mañana, Chapter 3. Lupita lay beside her alternately sleeping and weeping mother for hours before she finally fell asleep near dawn. As she lay awake, she felt numb with the pressure of the evil things that had happened to her in so short a time. When she'd asked Mama earlier if she and Salvador must leave so quickly, Mama told her that Uncle Antonio had arranged to get the money from the moneylender first thing in the morning. Lupita shivered, thinking of the moneylender. She knew him by sight, a sharp-nosed man with cold, small eyes. See, Mama must pay him back on time. He would grab Papa's house in an instant and sell or rent it to somebody else. To make the payments, her mother must keep her job at the hotel, and the next oldest girl could leave school and begin to sell lottery tickets. The other one could quit school soon, too, and take care of the small boy and the baby. The widow would not be able to look after the baby once he began to run about. Lupita sighed. They would not get so much schooling now. None of them. She had liked school and grieved when Papa told her she must leave and start earning money by doing errands for people. Her dream had been to become a professora, a teacher someday, but she had to put that dream aside. Listening to her mother's heavy breathing, Lupita sighed again. Could Salvador be right when he said that the Ortegas had bewitched them? No, of course not. Lupita's teacher had told the class over and over that witchcraft was a foolish superstition. Yet everything was falling into place to benefit the Ortegas, except for Dorotea, who must be sad too. Perhaps Salvador could think of a way to send letters from the United States to Dorotea secretly. As for herself, she had already written the letter to Aunt Consuelo. It had gone to Consuelo Ruiz, Box 4, Route 2, Indio, California, USA. What a queer address. Lupita had copied it carefully from one of her aunt's old envelopes. What did the English words box and route mean? In any case, their meaning mattered little as long as the letter arrived, telling her aunt that Papa had been killed at sea and her niece and nephew were coming to Indio to find her. How hard it had been to write of Papa's death. Far harder than to tell Aunt Consuelo that she and Salvador expected to find work in Indio. Work hard was how she phrased it in the letter. See, she would work hard to help Mama and the younger children. Mama had said she was a good daughter. She would be a hard worker, too. Work would surely make her tomorrows better. But oh, how she would miss her family. Still, she would be with Salvador and not totally alone. She would have to look up to him now and obey him. He was not only 2 years older than she, he was almost a man, and head of the Torres family. As such, he was the one to tell her what to do. She hoped, though, he would sometimes listen to advice from her. The teacher at school had asked her again and again to be monitor in her classes. Didn't that mean she had a good head on her shoulders? Uncle Antonio arrived soon after Lupita had fixed the customary bean and tortilla breakfast for everyone. He had gone to the moneylender, and now he handed the borrowed 800 pesos to her mother. She counted out 100 pesos and, surprisedly, handed the rest of the money not to Salvador, but to Lupita. Lupita, Mama told her, I must go to the church and speak with the priest about the masses for your father, and then I have some other things to do. While I'm away, take Salvador's blue jacket, rip out an inside seam, put the pesos in there, and sew it up again so as not to show. You will wear that jacket and his old trousers and his red baseball cap. If you keep your braids up under the cap, no one will see them. Startled, Salvador demanded angrily, What? Lupita's to wear my clothing? See, your uncle and I think it will be safer for her to travel as a boy. Salvador, you will wear your father's good coat and trousers. Lupita will sew the rest of the pesos saved for a few you will carry in your pockets inside that coat. You will leave tomorrow morning. Lupita saw her brother's amazed glance and read his thoughts. He'd had time to ponder their forthcoming trip, and he'd decided he would rather go alone, or, better yet, invite some friend to go along with him. Then the journey to the United States would become an adventure. Already, Salvador was thinking of her as a burden. Without a word, he hunched his shoulders and left the house. Mama excused his rudeness to Uncle Antonio. Salvador has gone to say farewell to his friends. He is not himself. Forgive him." Uncle Antonio nodded. "It does not matter. This is a hard thing for him." He smiled at Lupita. "It is a hard thing for you also, little one." "See, it will be hard." Lupita went into the bedroom where the family's clothing hung on nails. First, she took down Salvador's blue jacket, then Papa's black and white checked coat. She held the coat to her cheek for a moment, wetting it with her tears, before she came out to the living room with Mama's small sewing basket. There was no one in the room when she entered except for baby Hernando, who was sitting on the floor, sucking his thumb. Outside, her oldest sister was singing the same tune. "Pon, pon, tata, mericita pa la pa." Though it tore out at her heart, Lupita at once started to sew. When Mama returned that afternoon, she inspected Lupita's hiding place for the pesos. Then she and Lupita boiled a dozen eggs, which they packed into a small cloth bag along with some corn tortillas and a bottle of water. "This food will take you and Salvador to Tijuana," Mama instructed. "If you need more water, you can find it along the way. The priest told me so. This food will be your breakfast tomorrow morning. Do not forget the sack when you go away." "No, Mama." Lupita quickly looked away from her mother, fighting more tears. She had wept so much that her eyes and throat ached. Mama went on softly. "Lupita, leave early in the morning before the little ones awaken. I will tell them afterward why you and Salvador have gone. I do not want them crying all night long. As soon as the rosary is said for your papa tonight, we shall all go to bed. You and Salvador must have some rest." "See, I understand." Lupita saw her mother bite her lip and look suddenly away. "Sleep well if you can, Lupita. I'll give you my blessing in the morning." When everyone went home that evening, Uncle Antonio again stayed behind. He embraced Lupita and said, "Vaya con Dios, little one. Go with God." Then he and Salvador went outside, where they talked for a long time. At the first crow of the widow's cock, Lupita slipped out of bed. In the dark, she struggled into a ragged old shirt of Salvador's, then his trousers, which she rolled up, and finally his blue jacket. She neatly tucked her long braids under his red baseball cap. The last thing she put on were her own leather sandals. His tennis shoes were too big for her. "Lupita," her mother's hoarse voice came from the dark bed. "Go now. I will pray for you. Do not make any noise as you leave. Write me from your aunt's house as soon as you have arrived. Now, send Salvador in to me." "See, Mama." Lupita fumbled her way to her mother's side of the bed and bent over. She felt her mother's hands pull her down, and then she was kissing the tear-soaked face. "Vaya con Dios, my daughter." Lupita slipped out to the other room and went over in where her brother slept on the floor. He sat up. She could see by the dim light that he was fully dressed in Papa's clothing. Had he slept at all? "Lupita," he whispered. "See, Mama wants to bless you too. Go to her now." Salvador said nothing, but he got up and went softly into the bedroom. Lupita folded his blanket and put both it and the cardboard he'd slept on under the table. When she'd heard her brother's quick returning footfalls, Lupita picked up the sack of food she had left on the chair beside the front door the night before. Salvador grunted. "Come on, then," and they stepped out the door into the dawn. Closing the door silently after her, an exhausted, dry-eyed Lupita followed Salvador down the hill into the town. Go with God, Mama and Uncle Tonio had told them. Lupita looked up at the sky where a few late stars winked down at her. She wished she could believe that one was Papa's, and that wherever she went he would look down on her and bless her and protect her. But that was only a pretty thought, made up for small children, who would believe anything anyone told them. Lupita thought of calling out to Salvador to slow his pace, but she did not. Let him go through Ensenada ahead of her if he so chose. He was trying to show his courage by being her leader. Let him then. He needed to. When they passed through town, she could catch up with him. She'd point out to him that she was supposed to be a boy too, and that he should behave toward her as if she were one. Some dogs barked at them, and they went along the paved road leading north out of Ensenada, but that was the only attention they received. Crowing roosters and yapping dogs were the only creatures abroad at dawn today. In a little while, the town would start to come alive, and the fishing boats would sail out of the bay into the ocean. Perhaps Captain Ortega had already prepared La Estrella for another expedition, with a new man aboard to replace Hernando Torres. Lupita felt sure that Ortega wouldn't find anyone as good as Papa had been. Despite his feelings about Salvador, Ortega had kept Papa on his crew. That proved Papa was one of his best fishermen in port. At the north edge of town, just below the rich Chapultepec Hills district, Lupita ran up to her brother with a tortilla and an egg taken from her sack. As they both ate, she asked, "How far is it to the United States?" "It is 2 or 3 days' walk to Tijuana. That's where the border is," he grunted and added, "I do not know how far it is in distance. Perhaps later we can get a ride in an automobile." "An automobile, Salvador?" "Si, an automobile, silly one," he mocked her. "Why should we walk if we can ride? I'll call out to the car when we see one." "Mamma and Uncle Antonio did not tell us to get rides in cars." Salvador laughed harshly. "They did not tell us not to either. I'll keep watch for a Mexican car. No gringo would pick us up, and if he did, how could we talk to him unless he spoke Spanish? One of my friends went to Tijuana once. He got a ride in the back of an old truck, driven by a Mexican. He was lucky. The truck went almost all the way into Tijuana." Lupita looked back at Ensenada, which lay under a soft white mist that had drifted in from the sea. "Don't look back," Salvador ordered her sharply. "Keep your eyes ahead, and don't weep. Remember, you're a boy, my brother, not my sister. Walk beside me, and do as I do." "I won't cry, Salvador." Walking beside him, she slipped her hand into his. He angrily jerked his away, but then a few steps later, he reached out and took her hand for a moment in his again. They walked along the paved road together, and after a time, Salvador pointed out the Todos Santos Islands, offshore. Papa had often sailed among them, and he had often spoken of them to Lupita. They were beautiful, but had no fresh water, so only sea lions and seabirds lived there. Lupita could spy some pelicans out fishing, diving awkwardly into the sea. How they plummeted straight down into the water. One would think they would be hurt by their furious impact with the sea. But no, they almost always came up with a fish in their beak. The pelicans worked hard to satisfy their needs. They thrived by effort. Why shouldn't she in Salvador? As she walked along the rising road that bordered the sea, Lupita's eyes smarted from the sharp brightness of the blue water and the white surf curling onto the beach, many feet below. The sea was peaceful now, sunny and radiant. Looking at it below, she could hardly believe that it had been so cruel as to sleep Papa away. It could not be trusted. Lupita let out a deep sigh of sadness, asking herself if even the effectiveness of hard work could be trusted. Who knew what working in Yankee country would be like? If only she or Salvador knew the language, they would have an easier time. "Lupita, do not sigh so much," chided Salvador. "Boys don't do that. If you feel sad, curse, but don't sigh. Curse old Ortega if you want to. Call him every bad name you can think of." "Si, Salvador." As mid-morning arrived, several big gleaming tourist cars and a bus traveling south to Ensenada passed them. Going fast on the good road, they whizzed by, the people inside not even glancing their way. 3 older model cars with Mexican license plates went by in the other direction, but none stopped at Salvador's signal. A green bus, half full of Mexicans, passed them next. When it had gone by, Salvador said, "I wish Mama had told us to ride a bus." "It would cost money we might need later," Lupita warned. "Perhaps the next car going north will pick us up." "Always Lupita Mañana," Salvador muttered. The next car, a banged-up red sedan, went past them in a cloud of exhaust fumes. Salvador looked down at his sister and repeated, "Mañana, mañana." But, all at once, the red car made a U-turn and returned, stopping a distance ahead of them. A thick-set young man in a plaid shirt got out of the passenger side and gestured for Salvador and Lupita to come up to the car.